Good afternoon and welcome, whether you're in church or online, to our regular Wednesday reflection. If you're in church, please continue looking around, doing what you're doing. My name's Catherine Waddams. I'm a lay minister here at Peter Mancroft, and today I want to talk about David and Goliath. Macclesfield, a small town in Cheshire, was in the news for all the right reasons last weekend. Their football club won in the fourth round of the FA Cup against Crystal Palace. Actually, I think it was maybe not the fourth round, but anyway, they won in that round. And Crystal Palace is 117 places above them in the league tables, and indeed the holders of the cup, having won it last year. And I thought that was a real David versus Goliath story, in which, of course, the weaker side is triumphant against all the odds. In fact, against all odds is almost a mantra of Macclesfield Football Club. I've got an attachment to Macclesfield through frequent visits to the family who live there. We often drive home along the London Road en route to Leek, passing the familiar Moss Rose leasing.com football stadium. Just 10 years ago, our family made a 4-generational family visit to a Boxing Day match there. My grandson and his father, my son-in-law, my husband and his father. Turned out to be his last Christmas. He was 90 years old, but that wasn't because of the football game, even though Macclesfield lost. This weekend's win was particularly poignant, not only because a Macclesfield player had been killed in a car accident a few days earlier, but because the traditional local team, Macclesfield Town FC, which had a long and very proud history, and which my family had watched 10 years ago, had gone into liquidation in 2020. Today's Macclesfield Football Club is something of a phoenix, buying some of the assets of its predecessor, like the stadium, rooted in the local community, and gradually climbing up league tables from the very bottom. They do have a rich owner who is devoted to the club's revival, but they have much less money and resources than their higher-ranked rivals. Perhaps we particularly welcome a story about the underdog winning now, when the world news seems to be dominated by people wielding their power and influence and threatening to wield more. International dialogue sometimes seems to mimic the behavior of the playground, and regimes using violence against their opponents. Even in this country, it seems that policy is influenced by the loudest voices and greatest influence. Governments have changed policies, sometimes as dramatically as a U-turn, because of heavy lobbying. Whatever we think about the merits of extending partial inheritance tax to farmers and increasing business taxes, the noises and demonstrations of the people who would be adversely affected seems to have led to their softening. Is that really because of the merits of the case? Of course, new evidence may cause a change of policy. John Maynard Keynes, the eminent economist, is credited with the phrase, "When my information changes, I change my mind. What do you do?" But I wonder about the people who aren't able to present new facts, who have a quieter voice. For example, businesses which aren't pubs, who now object to the preferential treatment for drinks hospitality. Or even more importantly, I think, the people who would have been the beneficiaries of the original policies, for whom there will now be less money. Almost any change helps some people and harms others. The losers can easily identify the harm to themselves, can see what other people have the same arguments, and they know how to combine and lobby against the change. It is often less clear who the winners will be. They're usually less aware of the potential gains, and they feel less strongly about it. We all experience loss aversion when someone threatens to take away something we feel we own or have a right to. If people who shout loudly enough do influence decisions, where does that leave democracy based on an equal say for everyone? Isn't the idea that we each have a vote to elect central or indeed local governments who then take the difficult decisions, including some inevitable trade-offs, at least in the spirit of the mandate that they've been given. Of course, there's similar inequality on the money front. It's not called spending power for nothing. People with more money just have more votes as markets respond to individual buying decisions. And political power is usually closely intertwined with financial power, the two often reinforcing each other. Exercising such power is nothing new, but it has been much more open and obvious in recent months. Perhaps that's a good thing that we're able to see it. But it sits uneasily with my own faith. We've just celebrated Christmas, the birth of Jesus as a homeless refugee who had to flee across borders to escape Herod's power. You can't get much more powerless than the position of the Holy Family. And that baby hardly went on to a great worldly career, with another expression of utter earthly powerlessness on the cross. Of course, he did show power of persuasion in his ministry through his teaching and healing acts. But Jesus repeatedly spoke and acted on behalf of marginalized people, and himself modeled servant leadership, especially in washing his disciples' feet. The first shall be last, and the last first, he responded to a bid by an ambitious mother for the, quote, best seats in the house for her own 2 sons. But I contrast that with my belief that God is omnipotent. And we speak of God's kingdom. We marvel at the power that is shown in creation. In the Magnificat, we do sing of scattering the proud in their conceit, casting down the mighty from their thrones, lifting up the lowly, filling the hungry with good things, sending the rich away empty. But we also speak of the power, the strength of God's arm. How can we reconcile the uneasiness at the current show of power with the belief that God is himself all-powerful? And I suppose the answer lies in how power is used. God exercises divine power in the interests of the underdog, of marginalized people. Earthly power, whether acquired legitimately or otherwise, should also be exercised in the interests of everyone, for the common good, with a preference for people who are lowly or hungry, mirroring how God's power is used. A preference for the Davids of this world rather than Goliaths. It's almost exactly a year since Marianne Edgar Buddy, Bishop of Washington, reminded the newly inaugurated president, "The country has been entrusted to you, and one of the qualities of a leader is mercy." Part of my own uneasiness with people who identify as Christian nationalists is their emphasis on power and the absence of mercy in their rhetoric. The Church of England itself has certainly misused its own power and privilege in the past, an inheritance which continues to challenge its current role. And I am aware that as a white, middle-class, well-educated, high-income person living in a fine house, as well as in a fine city, I am one of the privileged and powerful, rather than one of the marginalized. I am challenged to follow Jesus' teaching and example in the way that I use my own power and influence. The next round of the FA Cup is on Valentine's Day weekend. Perhaps you'll be at Carrow Road in body or in spirit, cheering the Canaries on against West Bromwich Albion, who are just 4 points above them in the Championship. Macclesfield are also playing at home again, this time against Brentford, ranked even higher than Crystal Palace. Can David beat a second Goliath? I wonder who you'll be cheering for in that game. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you every blessing for the rest of your day.